Hey guys, it's Jessica.
And this is Kendra, and you're listening to
Lucid Lab.
So it's Super Bowl Sunday, and Jessica's headed out on her trip. So this is our first rerun episode. We are going to go back, way back. It's actually the first true crime episode that I recorded. And it's a football player.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And he's probably one of the worst football players we've known that I can think of because he did horrible things.
Yes, he did.
Going back to this and listening to it again, I was just so shocked with how much this guy did.
Yeah.
I've forgotten, and we've covered a lot of true crime since, but this guy was truly just an absolute horror. I did look him up because it's been a couple of years since we recorded. He is still alive. He is still in prison, and he's now 74 years old.
Why don't they just go away? Like completely.
I kind of wish he had gotten the death penalty.
Just die.
But no death penalty in Oregon. We talk about that in the episode. So please enjoy listening back to one of our originals.
Yes.
And that is the I-5 killer. So let me tell you about Randall Woodfield.
All right.
Over the course of only 11 weeks, he did a lot.
Yeah.
He started his crime spree in December of 1980. There were vicious reports of sexual assaults, murder, robberies, and kidnappings occurring along the I-5 corridor stretching from Washington State down to California. The perpetrator was dubbed as the I-5 killer. The victims were mostly young females between ages of 16 and 22 who worked at fast food, grocery, and convenience stores. This guy was committing multiple crimes within the same day.
Yikes.
He was in a manic
It was
state.
a true spree.
Yes.
Okay.
Because there was no real connection and they were happening all over the place. I personally am really proud of the law enforcement that they were able to stop him in the 11 weeks. Early March of 1981, law enforcement arrested a man named Randall Woodfield in association with a string of all these crimes. He was the quintessential all-American guy next door.
It's so scary.
He was 30 years old.
Wow.
He was 6'2", very good looking. He was polite, soft-spoken, and well-liked by everyone who knew him. Woodfield has never confessed to any of the crimes which he has been accused or convicted of. The sad part is he has only been convicted of one murder and one attempted murder. However, over the coming years and decades following this one conviction, he has been linked via DNA to many other. It is believed that he is connected to up to 44 murder victims. And he has also been linked through DNA to over 60 sexual assault cases.
Oh my gosh.
CBS News named him one of the deadliest serial killers in American history. So when I was researching Randall Woodfield, one of the main sources I used is a book called The I-5 Killer by Anne Rule. The most interesting thing about her is that she actually worked directly with the detectives. She was from this area in Oregon, and she talked to the witnesses. She was at all of the trials, and she's been involved in many true crime cases. So it felt like really good detail. Randall Woodfield, after he was incarcerated, and she released this book about 3 years after he was convicted, and he tried to sue her
for telling his story.
Yeah, she psychoanalyzes what she thinks. He went after women, and he didn't like that because he's a very proud guy. So I think it's funny. He sued her for $12 million. The judge looked at it and just kind of laughed and threw it right out.
Well, good.
So let's talk about Randy and where he came from. He was born on December 26, 1950. So his mom actually went into labor on Christmas Day.
Okay.
His mom picked out the name Randall, and she wanted to call him Randy. It's been said that he hated the nickname Randy. He didn't feel like it sounded distinguished enough.
So that's why we're calling him Randy.
So his parents were Walter Jack and Donna Jean Woodfield. Walter was 27 and Donna Jean was 24 when Randall was born. They were an upper middle class family. His dad worked for Pacific Northwest Bell. He worked there for 30 plus years and made very good money. His mom was a stay-at-home mom. This is typical 50s household.
Okay.
He had two older sisters named Susan and Nancy, and his parents were so excited when they finally got the baby boy they wanted.
Right.
His dad worked long hours, and so his mom did most of the child rearing and discipline. There is a lot said in the book that I read that she was a perfectionist and he felt the need to please his mom. So there was a little bit of mom-son dynamic there.
Gotcha.
It also came up that he was very jealous of his older sisters because they were quite a bit older than him. He really resented that his sisters got to go out and he had to stay home with a babysitter. So they think some of that may have started. He was in a female-dominated household. And something about his mom, it comes up repeatedly that he just felt like he needed to please his mom.
I feel like that's also very typical back then too.
They were like one of the upper class families. They went to all the picnics, all the town events. Everybody liked them.
That's such a last name too. Oh, the Woodfields.
The Woodfields. They settled in Otter Rock, Oregon. So that sounds perfect too. It's a small little town. The closest big city is Corvallis, which I believe is where the University of Oregon is located. Okay. So they were in this small little town making good money. Mom was at home being the 50s housewife. Randall, or Randy, he was actually like the favorite. He was the only boy. He got a lot of special treatment.
So why is he so upset?
And then his parents had high hopes for him. He was a beautiful baby. He had dark brown curly hair. He was just a good looking boy. And they realized from a young age that he was athletically inclined. And this would come into play as he got into high school. He was like the number one athlete. And he could do it all. He could do football. He could do basketball. He broke records in track and field.
Did he hit his head?
He played baseball. There was nothing about a frontal cortex.
Oh, he's playing all those sports. I'm sure he hit his head somewhere. Maybe that's where this started.
The other thing in the 1950s that families never talked about was sex. And this was a very quiet family. Dad was never home. Dad wasn't like hanging out with his son. And there was a story where Randy tried to tell his dad about some girls at school, and he was talking about how he heard some of them were loose.
Oh, goodness.
And his dad basically shut him down and said, we don't talk about that kind of stuff in this house. So he was very sexually repressed.
Okay.
At the young age of just 13 years old, Randy started exposing himself to girls. He was running around Newport, exposing himself multiple times per day in various places. He would stand in corners and wait for young girls to come by and jump out and be like, look at this.
And how old was he at the time doing this? You said 13?
13.
The fuck?
He was in a small town, so he got caught pretty quickly.
And people know him.
This is happening while he is also the popular athlete. But he would choose women and girls that I guess he
didn't
know him. I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
Anyways, the cops did catch him at one point, and they brought him to his parents and said, this is happening. And the parents said, he's just a young boy. He's going through a sexual awakening.
And we won't talk to him about it. So
let's push it under the rug.
Flinging it around.
Essentially.
Yeah.
And because he was the star athlete, the cops didn't want to press charges, send him to reform school because he had, his whole life ahead of him.
Right.
And it's just whatever. He's not touching girls. He's not hurting them. He's just showing off his penis. No big deal. They did mention that he should go to therapy, but once again, in the 1950s, therapy was not something that parents embraced. And so they never sent him to any kind of therapy.
Okay.
I mean, if my child was running around town and showing his dick to everybody, I think I might want to do some therapy. But this was the 1950s. True. It was a different time. Even after Randy was arrested and convicted for all of his crimes, his parents still say that there was no indication that their child was a sexual deviant while he lived under their roof. He was a good student. He was an amazing athlete. He made the all-state football team as a junior, which is not common. He was chosen as Boy of the Month for the Rotary Club. All the most desirable girls wanted to date him, and he was very popular and able to date anyone he wanted. His dream was to become an NFL player, and as a wide receiver, he was recruited to play at colleges. He had a bright future ahead of him.
Yikes.
Parents are proud of this boy. Yeah. The whole town's proud of him.
But he just needed to...
They can't keep it in his pants.
Yeah.
So he ended up at Treasure Valley College. So his best friend was Rob Schaefer, and they were friends from high school, and they went off to college together. He said the only time he saw Randy behave oddly is that he stole some cassette tapes from a guy in their dorm, and then he lied about it. So his first serious girlfriend, her name was Sharon McNeil. They were in college, so she was still, hanging out with other guys. And at one point she said, you know what, I don't want to be your girlfriend anymore. I want to date around, normal college behavior. She broke up with him. He could not handle it. He was obsessive towards her, and he broke into her parents' house and completely vandalized her room, like threw clothes everywhere, just went in and tore the whole room up.
Why is this sounding like Ted Bundy? Isn't that similar?
We will find with Randy, he can't handle any kind of rejection from a woman. It really hurts his ego.
Wonderful.
So he broke into Sharon's room. The only thing taken was a stuffed animal that he had given to her. He was arrested, but he was found not guilty by a jury trial because there was no physical evidence linking him to the vandalization. He took the teddy bear, but they had no way to prove that it was actually him. It was all circumstantial.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it was him.
Oh, who else is it gonna be?
Who else goes in and steals?
And then it deliberately only messes up one girl's room.
You're gonna find in this case, what's so infuriating is this guy could have been caught so many times before all these people died.
But he's just this good looking kid that is constantly getting off with things.
So Sharon had to get an unlisted phone number because he would bombard her with calls. 10 years after she had last seen Randy, she received a letter from him and it included a nude photograph of him. 10 years later, can you imagine like your ex-boyfriend from 10 years ago? You just open your mail and there his naked body is.
Gross.
She had never given him any indication of interest after they broke up in 1970. And 10 years later, she's still getting Christmas cards and naked photos. However, she said while he was annoying, she never really felt frightened by his attention.
She just thought it was mental.
She didn't feel like he was ever going to do anything to her. So during the summer off from school, he went to work in Toledo, right along the coast of Oregon. He found a girlfriend there. He was in college. The girl he decided to set his attentions on was in 8th grade. She met him at the football field. He was just there playing like a rec league and she saw him as a big brother. He was 20 and she was 14. It's a big difference in like mental state.
It is.
He's in college. She's still in junior high.
We've been talking about this a lot, being that age and older men.
And you think it's flattering.
I look back and I'm like, wow.
It started out platonic and then he started asking her to go to movies and kind of like the grooming situation. And at one point he asked if he could spend the night with her. He got her drunk. He tried to get her to sleep with him. And she said, I'm a nice girl. I'm 14. I don't do that. So he said, that's fine if you just do other things. And she said that he never really pressured her. So she thought he was a good guy. Like she didn't feel frightened.
Okay.
One odd thing he did do, he asked Tracy to call his ex-girlfriend Sharon.
And be like, I'm in 8th grade and I am doing naughty things with him. Are you impressed?
He loved to do this kind of stuff because...
to make her feel like she's missing out, that he's having other
like, you'll find he does this a lot. So he's very manipulative with women and he gets them to believe that he was falsely accused. He had Tracy. He told her that Sharon's parents wouldn't let him call her anymore and he had been falsely accused of breaking into her room. But he's like, I just went to her room and asked for my stuffed animal back that I gave her. And Tracy's like, okay. And he's like, I just want to talk to her and explain what happened so she doesn't think that I did this. And so Tracy's feeling sorry for him. He can't call Sharon because she's changed her number 1,000 times and he's blocked. And so Tracy called his ex-girlfriend for him. So those are things that he would do.
Highly, highly obsessed with Sharon. Yikes.
However, he also became obsessed with Tracy. When he returned to college, he would write her letters. She says she remembers him as a funny, kind, and good-looking guy and really just saw him as like a brother figure. She did say that he always mentioned pressure to live up to what his parents wanted him to be.
He was being a little bit more honest with Tracy than he was being otherwise.
Right, with his 14-year-old girlfriend.
I see that too with older men and younger girls. They feel like they can be more honest with them. And then the girls are like, wow, he's
sharing so much
so
with
deep
me.
And sharing so much with me.
She did say he also cared almost too much about what others thought of him. So he was very...
I can see that.
He needed approval from outside. Yeah. Tracy continued an on and off friendship with Randy for years and years. And this is something you'll see in the story as well. Like once he met someone, they stayed in his life a long time and he wanted to hold on to everyone. And he would write letters and make sure that these girls never forgot him. She says when he was convicted, she could not reconcile that the man accused of all these horrible crimes was that same sweet boy she knew that summer.
It's weird, but they just choose a few that they're good with, that they would never harm in any way.
And in reading about Randy, he always had more girl friends than male friends. He was very good with the ladies, both as just platonic friends and dating. In 1971, he decided he needed to move to a better school if he wanted to make the dream of becoming an NFL player a reality. He was not going to be discovered at Treasure Valley. So he moved to Portland State. This took him to a larger city. When he moved to Portland State, he made an abrupt change. And I think this is him trying to fight his inner demons. He became super religious. He got involved with the Crusade for Christ. He stopped having sex and he would only date Christian girls who were virgins. He focused all of his attention into sports, football, track, etc. Basically was trying to repress his sexuality. We know that's not going to end well, right?
No.
So while he was doing this, pretending to be the squeaky clean religious guy, he was still fighting the urge towards exhibitionism. He could easily drive into Portland or Vancouver, Washington, both large towns. He could go back to exposing himself. He did that. He liked accosting younger girls that had maybe not seen an erect penis before. He loved loved seeing little girls blush or shriek.
Just react in general.
It was all about the reaction. So in 1972, he was arrested for exposure in Vancouver. He was charged and convicted, but because there had been no previous arrests, they looked at the fact that he had been a star athlete and he was enrolled in college, and they said, you know what? It's just a boy being a boy, and they let him off.
You know, those boys being boys.
So Portland State never knew that he was charged with exposure in Vancouver. He, once again, just continued going to religious meetings. He took a mission trip with the Campus Crusade for Christ to Lake Tahoe one summer. He was arrested again in Portland in 1973. So 1 year later, after the Vancouver, they sentenced him to 5 months in jail, but he never served any time. And they said he would have 1 year probation, but nobody ever followed up. They said he should go to therapy, but he never did. 1 year later, in 1974, he got arrested again for indecent exposure. This time they gave him 5 years probation, and they also mandated counseling. He never went to the counseling that time either, but he did check in for all of his probation, so he was seen as a upstanding member that was trying to get better. He was an upstanding member. Ha ha. So because records showed that he had never actually touched or hurt a woman, and he was such a good student, a star athlete, and he had a good work ethic because he always maintained good jobs, they thought their probation would cure him.
Why would probation cure anybody?
I think that they just thought this was a phase. I remember reading about sex offenders and them talking about indecent exposure, and even me, I discounted that. I'm like, oh, that's not really.
But if you're doing it all the time.
All the time, and as we'll see, it does escalate.
Okay.
While they get a thrill at first from girls just laughing or blushing or shrieking, eventually it's just like a drug, right? You need to get the same thrill. You got to keep amping it up. February 20th, 1974, his dreams finally came true. He was seen in playing for Portland State, and the Green Bay Packers offered him a contract for the chance to play for them.
Okay.
So he was given $16,000 up front, and then room and board for training and regular season. He would make bonuses if he actually made the roster. So they were looking for 47 people that would join the team and travel with them. In the 1970s, this was a decent amount of money. Mm-hmm. For him to sign this contract, he became a representative of the Green Bay Packers. So of course he had to wear a coat and tie when out in public. He had to be careful about interviews he would do, basically just continue to be an upstanding member of society.
Without showing your upstanding member.
There was no clause around morals or criminal background, interestingly enough.
Maybe back then there just wasn't as huge a pool of people to choose from. And so if they included that, they wouldn't get good talent.
Randy was excited. His parents were so proud of him. He got his dream. He drove his car to Wisconsin. He stayed in the residence hall. And this was probably the best time of his life. Unfortunately, after trying out, did not make the team.
Maybe that would have helped.
He was one of the best wide receivers. There is question about why he was not chosen. The Packers declined to say why he was cut, but there is a lot of speculation that he continued to expose himself in Wisconsin. He didn't make the Green Bay Packers, but he did stay in Wisconsin, and he played for what they call the farm team. So it's like the minor league team. They were called the Manitowoc Chiefs, and that would give him a chance if he could prove himself to eventually make it to the Packers.
Okay.
He played one season from September through December 1974, and then they unexplainably let him go as well. We think he was doing things.
Yeah.
When he was convicted as the I-5 killer, some of those police districts from Wisconsin did release records to the detectives involved, and it did come back that there were 10 to 20 incidents of him with indecent exposure in Wisconsin while he lived there.
He needs a chastity belt.
After he was let go, he had to drive back to Portland. He was obviously very disappointed. He felt like he let his parents down, and he was angry. He felt like he had been done wrong. He's probably a narcissist, obviously, in a lot of ways. And so he can't take any fault. Like I said, to this day, he still won't admit guilt for all of these things he's done, even though DNA shows he did. He only had 3 semesters of college left, but he lost all motivation to finish, so he never graduated from college. Randy is now 25 years old. All his friends have graduated from college. They're getting married. They're building strong careers. His best friend became a professor. He has other friends who are going to medical school, and he's working part-time for a trucking company, barely making it. And he starts bartending at night. He was at the point where he just felt like he was going nowhere and his dreams were done. So in early 1975, Portland police started dealing with a situation. Several women had reported being accosted at knife point while out on runs or walks in Dunaway Dunaway Park. The attacker would expose himself, and then he would force the women to perform oral sex. He would then steal their purses. It was known that he would sneak up behind them so they wouldn't even know he was coming. He was waiting in the bushes. They would run by, and then all of a sudden there was a knife at their neck. All of the descriptions said he was a tall, good-looking young man. This was happening often enough that they started staking out police in Dunaway Park to try and catch this perpetrator, but he was smart enough to know that there were police there, and so they realized that wasn't going to draw him out. So they found a woman that worked for the police department, and she was going to be the decoy. So she was to walk along the path alone at night. They gave her 8 $1 bills that were marked to put in her purse, and she had a signal on her, and they would have cops nearby to come if she was attacked. She drew him out on March 5th, 1975. He felt her up, so he didn't get as far as he did with the others, and then she was able to signal, and her backup officers came out and grabbed him, and they found that it was Randall Woodfield. He had a paring knife and a starter pistol on him. He stole her purse. That was actually how they were able to convict him, because the marked $1 bills were in there. So he actually did get taken in and convicted. This really frustrates me because he was a star athlete and had no previous criminal record. He was only charged with first-degree robbery. They dropped all charges of oral sodomy that had happened to the previous women. So
yeah, that's fucked up.
what really bothers me, because he was not charged with the sexual assault, he was not registered as a sex offender in the system. When he was captured, the police psychologist that was there, he basically started crying to them and said he can't control himself of his sexual urges. He said they were out of his control, and he thought it was because he took steroids, and that was just causing him to have this inability to stop exposing himself and assaulting women. He came across as actually wanting treatment, and he even told the psychologist, he says, I just need to be locked up. I can't trust myself. They actually gave him an intelligence test while he was in jail, and it showed that his IQ was only 100. They also mentioned in their write-up that he seemed very detached from his crimes. It was almost like he thought it was a different version of himself that was committing these crimes.
Multiple personalities.
I think so. I think there was part of that. So he really maybe truly in one mind didn't think he was doing it.
It was like Bad Randall who was taken over. And
yeah, they actually say later on in one of the interviews I saw, they said when they talked to Randall, he was the good version, and when they talked to Randy, he was the bad version. So it seemed like there was like this split
it wasn't
personality.
a difference in names though. It was the same name. Usually isn't it like a completely different
Yeah.
name for the most part?
He doesn't ever get diagnosed as schizophrenic or anything like that,
okay.
but maybe it was his tactic to just be like, oh, I don't remember. Randy
Doesn't it-
must have done that. It seemed concerning now because he had escalated from exposure to actually touching his victims. So the evaluation was Randall Woodfield is a very serious threat to the community, and he needs to be institutionalized.
Well, he's proved it like hundreds of times already just with the
Right.
exposure.
So on June 10th, 1975, Randy was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The judge did bring up that he was upset that they had chosen to drop the sexual charges. He had the opinion that he needed to spend the full 10 years in an institution for sexually dangerous offenders in the Oregon Psychiatric Hospital. But because he had only been convicted on robbery charges, he ended up in the state penitentiary in Salem, Oregon. So he was not a good prisoner. He received a lot of disciplinary tickets. He was rude to the guards. They said he had a bad attitude. He thought he was better than all the other inmates. He really resented that there were female guards in his area. And he brings this up multiple interviews, even in his 50s. It makes him mad that women are allowed to be above male inmates.
It surprises me to have a female guard and all men.
He did take the opportunity, though, because there were females around. He would expose himself to the female guards.
And you can't get rearrested for it.
Right. In a way, it was
Like it was fueling him.
Yeah. He would get excited if they would come into the shower area. There were reports that like the female guards would walk by his jail cell and he'd be completely clothed. And then when they walked back by, he'd be standing there naked.
Ooh, that just creeped me out.
He also resented them and didn't like the fact that women, once again, were controlling his life. During group therapy, he had a female therapist. She was trying to get to the heart of his sexual fantasies, and he looked at her with cold eyes and said, I'll tell you my sexual fantasy if you tell me yours first. He got written up for that.
Of course.
He grew a beard, which was not allowed while in prison. He got written up for that. And then he also had high top Nikes. He was very into how he looked, as I mentioned before.
Even in jail.
And he had, I don't know who, somebody smuggled in these high top Nikes, and all the other inmates made fun of him because it looked ridiculous when he's in
He's like, I like my shoes. Why can't you have a beard?
I guess because they can hide things. I think it's
true.
just, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe they can
sure.
hide stuff in it.
So because he had only been convicted of the robbery charge, he did not carry the stigma of being a sexual pervert, which is something that even in prison makes you not so popular.
Right.
So he made lots of friends in prison. He also took college extension courses while in prison, and he joined the Christian Bible study groups. His family at this time would still visit him while he was in prison. They only knew about the robbery charges. They had no idea about the sexual assaults. He also wrote many, many letters, including to his girlfriend from that summer named Tracy Connors, who was the 8th grader that he dated. He was asking her to like sell wallets he was making while in prison. He was trying to like make
Sell
money
wallets?
on the outside. She said it was really bizarre.
And at this point, she also doesn't know the other things.
Nobody knows. Everybody
Okay.
on the outside knows he's in prison, but he's telling everyone, you know, I was unfairly framed. He was going to one-on-one therapy during this time while in prison, and they were trying to talk him through what might have caused his proclivity for this sexual exposure. He theorized that it was from his first girlfriend rejecting him, and he said he felt vindictive towards all women in general because he just couldn't get over that heartbreak. However, this was flawed thinking, as the psychiatrist pointed out, because his exposure started well before Sharon.
Right.
In 1976, he told the therapist he had solved his problem. He was never going to have sex again. But he always felt a little guilty and that sex was dirty. He would only seek women for spiritual reasons in the future, and that there was more to life than sex. He wanted to turn his life around, find a wife, and raise a family.
You got to have sex for that.
He convinced the therapist that he accepted he was guilty. So he became con smart, is what they call it.
Okay.
He realized what he needed to say to get them
Right.
to let him out. And he promised he would find help as soon as they let him out of prison. He also said he had learned to accept rejection from women. And he said, I understand where I went wrong. I'm 27 now, and I think I can overcome it with the right help. A male therapist decided he was honest and that he was no longer a threat to society.
Okay.
So they let him go on work release. They said he was not a violence risk. In 1979, only 4 years after he was locked up for a sentence of 10 years, where the judge had said he was a scary sex offender, but that wasn't on his record, they let him out.
Eek.
And this is where it all really goes downhill. So as soon as he got out in July of 1979, he decided to reconnect with his high school friends. He saw that it had been 10 years, and he decided to become the chairman to run the 10-year high school reunion.
Okay.
Everyone remembered him as being the all-American football popular guy. Some of them didn't even know he had been in prison. Anyone that asked, he said he had robbed some photomat booths because he was hard on money, and he had got caught in a sting operation by the cops. No big deal. You know, I wasn't doing anything that bad.
Yeah,
just
and
a little
I
money.
needed money.
So then people feel sorry for him.
I mean, he only got $8.
Right? Out of a photo. You have to rob a lot. As we all know, he loves women being in power over him. His parole officer assigned was a woman, and he had to report to her. He was not very good at that. She didn't keep track of him, but also they didn't see him as a threat, so she didn't really chase him down. So he was pretty much, even though he's on work release and he was supposed to be watched very closely, he was not.
Okay.
So while at the 10-year reunion, he ran into Sherry Ayers. So this was a classmate that he had known since second grade, and she had written to him while he was in prison. They were just platonic friends as far as anyone knew. He had a little black book.
Okay.
He had over 255 names in it. He liked to keep tabs on them. He would call them. He would write them letters. He was quite the little Casanova. He was working a job at a manufacturing company, and he decided to move his career towards bartending because he wanted more access to women. He never tied himself down with one girl. He never dated a girl longer than a month or so. While he was out having all of his fun, he did contract herpes. While he was a bartender, he loved to allow underage girls to come in and drink at the bar.
Yep.
A lot of his coworkers said that he had a real affection towards younger girls. He ended up dating a 17-year-old cocktail waitress named Lucy Grant, and they moved in together. He was 29 at the time.
Wow.
He worked at a place called the Cheerful Tortoise. Coworkers noticed, even though he was dating Lucy, he still gravitated towards girls around 16 to 17 years old. One of his coworkers described him as a dumb blonde. They said he had the conversation skills of an 18-year-old. So it's almost like he just never developed past high school. So maybe that's why he was still going for younger girls. I also read that women his own age would tire of him quickly because he couldn't have a real conversation.
Right.
He wasn't going anywhere in life.
Yeah. I knew a couple of those dumb blondes.
Yeah, he was good looking and not much else. So one girl he dated for a few months that came out after he was arrested. She was 22 years old. He met her. She was a bank teller. They went out a few times. She mentioned that he was just so obsessed with female breasts that it was a turnoff to her. Like he wouldn't stop talking about it. She said he was just overly obsessed with women's bodies. And yeah, you don't want to date a guy who's talking about that all the time.
No.
She said he wasn't very smart and he wore thin real quick.
For sure.
When she dumped him, coworkers reported him coming into the bar and just talking shit about her and saying all these horrible things he was going to do to her. And he wouldn't let it go for a few weeks. And they'd only dated for like a week. So coworkers just thought that was a little off.
Right.
He kept getting hired at different bars, but he also kept getting fired. So he couldn't keep a job. Okay. They never really went into detail why, but maybe because he was letting underage girls drink. Maybe he was creepy. I don't know, but
maybe he was the type was like touching them when they walked past and
stuff. I imagine
just
he was just
people
annoying.
Complaining.
He was a very smothering type guy. So he worked at this place called the Fawcett Tavern in Beaverton. He was hired on April 9th. And then they let him go in October. He felt like he was done wrong within a week of being let go. He was also a manager, so he had a key to like all the back rooms and everything. Within a week of him being let go from this bar, $3,000 went missing from the cash register. Being that he was one of the only people who had a key other than the owners, they knew he was the one responsible. He denied the theft. And he felt furious for being accused, and he wrote a threatening letter to his former employer. He did admit later to a female friend that he was the one who robbed them. He knows he does wrong, but he doesn't want to be called out. After getting fired and the reported theft, he had a hard time finding a job. So he got a job at 7-Eleven, and he also got fired from there. Like he couldn't keep a job anywhere. In 1979, he decides that he's a good looking guy and he should try out for Playgirl magazine. So he sent a shot of himself greased up in baby blue bikini panties.
Oh, wow.
He was chosen by the magazine for Guy Next Door.
Okay.
And they said, you're in the finalists. We'll let you know if we decide to publish you. They never did, thankfully. This picture would come into play because he would make multiple copies and share it with lots of women in the future.
He took the time to make a legit photo.
I could not find the photo anywhere.
You couldn't?
I wish I could, because I would totally put it on our Instagram.
That's funny. At least he was wearing panties.
It's reported in so many places that he had been a Playgirl model. I want to make it very clear. Randy Woodfield wished he was a Playgirl model.
Okay.
He never made it.
Okay. Well, that's the thing about like reporting. They'll just say something even if they know it is completely untrue.
Just because it sounds good.
Just because it sounds better and it will sell the story.
They also said he was an NFL athlete. He wasn't. He never made the team.
He tried out.
He was a failure at everything he tried.
The only reason he failed at everything he tried was for one reason and one reason only.
He can't keep his member in his pants. So in August of 1980, he met another 17-year-old girl named Julie Wrights. He became good friends with her because he would allow her and her other underage friends to drink in the bar. He got Julie very intoxicated and he asked to come over to her mother's townhouse, and she was there with another friend. After they were drinking, the girls fell asleep and they slept together in their bed, and he went to sleep in Julie's mom's room. The next morning they woke up and he had crawled into bed with them and was getting a little fresh. They told him no thank you and he left. I bring this up because he doesn't seem violent. Like when girls tell him no, he doesn't do things, at least at this point.
But only to the girls he knows.
So Julie rejected him, but they continued to like be friends, and she continued to go out with him. And then she found out that he was living with this other 17-year-old girl named Lucy because he was still with her. So it was like this whole drama. Soon after this public situation where Julie called him out because she ran into him with Lucy, it was very embarrassing for him. And then Lucy dumped him. So he had now been rejected. He had been dating quite a bit since he got out of prison, but the women kept leaving him. He was never the one that chose to break up. He was always left. And what this did is it gave him this belief that all women would eventually betray him. Let's go back to Sherry Ayers. Sherry Ayers was the girl that he knew since second grade.
Okay.
She graduated in 1969 from Newport High. She was a brilliant, beautiful woman. She was going places. She attended Oregon State University, and then she was going on to University of Oregon Med School. So she was studying to become a doctor.
Okay.
She was working in Portland as a radiological technologist. On October 10th, 1980, she was found in her home. She had been bludgeoned over the head and then stabbed to death repeatedly in the neck.
She's the one that was writing him in prison, though, and stuff.
Yes, and they had been friends since second grade. They had never dated. He had just been rejected by Lucy. So this will be a trend that we see. He gets rejected and he acts out.
And he acts out on someone else.
On someone else.
Okay.
We don't know why he chose Cherry. Anyway,
maybe she did reject him at
we
some
don't,
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the investigation of her murder, they found that Randy Woodfield had visited her home many times. Because Randy had a previous prison record, he was questioned closely. The cops found him to be very evasive about his whereabouts during the time of the murder, and they asked him to take a polygraph test. He refused.
Okay.
The only thing forensic-wise they could find at the crime scene was that there were secretions of ejaculate on her.
Gross.
They obtained Randy's blood type from the prison records, and they knew that he was a B negative. Now, fortunately, B negative, I think it's only 10% of the population. Analysis of the secretion did not indicate at the time in 1980 that they came from a man with B negative blood type. So at that time, Randy was taken out as a suspect.
Oh.
However, the detective just had this feeling about Randy that he was involved. And he thought perhaps the reason the blood type didn't match the secretions is that she had a boyfriend. She could have had sex with her boyfriend earlier that night before she was murdered. She may not have actually been sexually assaulted by Randy. And so they think that may be why it didn't match. So they didn't have enough physical evidence to charge him. The family did finally get justice. And I want to bring this up because this case was open for 26 years.
Oh, wow.
They had frozen a sample of the secretions and they were able to test it in 2006. And they definitively were able to connect it to the DNA of Randall Woodfield.
Oh, so he did do it then.
He did. This is the thing with testing. It's like the blood type and all of that.
Yeah.
Perhaps they didn't have enough.
The test wasn't good enough back then.
Right. It's so upsetting because this was the first known murder that we have of Randall Woodfield. And if he had been caught, all these others wouldn't have happened.
Right.
The detective knew, but they had no way to put him behind bars. Very sad. So just one day after the murder occurred, Randy went to visit his friend from Portland State, a man named Tim Rossi. He and Tim were talking about women. And Tim mentioned that he had just been dumped by his girlfriend, Darcy for another man. Tim wasn't bitter about it. He was just like, these things happen. We grew apart.
Right.
She's on with another man. I actually know him. He's a great guy. I'm going to go see them. Like everything's fine. And Tim said, Randy went off the handle. And he was like, you can't trust fucking women. They'll betray you. She's probably cheating on you. And he said it was almost like Randy had been cheated on by Darcy
just
himself.
By hearing the story.
He could tell a significant change in his friend from when they had been in school together and how Randy was acting now. And he was like, I don't like this guy. Don't want to be friends with him. So that was October 11th. On November 27th, 1980, the day after Thanksgiving, Darcy Fix and her boyfriend, Doug Altig, were found shot to death in their apartment.
Oh my gosh. His friend's like, dude, I'm totally cool with it. And he's a good guy. And he goes and kills them.
Tim, his friend, was interviewed and Tim said, I was just at their house on Thanksgiving Day. He did mention to the cops, he was like, was Darcy able to protect herself because her dad had just given her a .32 caliber revolver and she kept it by her bed. The gun was so old that it had never been registered. So it was an unregistered .32 caliber revolver. When the cops heard this, they did a full search of the apartment. They turned it upside down. They could not find that gun.
Okay.
When doing the forensics, they found that Darcy and her boyfriend Doug had been shot by a .32 caliber revolver. This put two female acquaintances of Randall Woodfield killed in a span of just 6 weeks. Darcy and Doug, this was another cold case. In 2012, there was new DNA evidence that was used. This case was opened as a cold case investigation and they were able to definitively link Randy to the murder scene.
Okay.
What they believe happened is he showed up at Darcy's house with the intent to rape her. He was surprised to find her there with her boyfriend and that resulted in him just grabbing the gun next to her bed and shooting both of them. Once again, he has never admitted to this, but DNA evidence links him.
Right.
So in 6 weeks, he's now killed killed a friend that he's had since second grade and now his close friend's ex-girlfriend and her new boyfriend. But it is still 1980 and he is not accused of either of these crimes, so he is still a free man. So I tell you about these two background stories. These were really his start into the escalation to murdering people.
Right.
Their lives were taken before he even started his big killing spree that we all know of him for now, which is the I-5 killer.
Okay.
So Randy was obsessed with women in a very narcissistic way. He would run up large, long distance phone bills, back in the day when you had to pay per minute. He would spend hundreds of dollars a month just to call women because he wanted to keep them in his stable, on the side because he wanted to be able to draw from them when he needed like an ego boost.
He needed to keep them all close in some way.
Yes. And that is narcissistic
right.
tendency. He would send them letters. He would send gifts. He would send flowers and just make sure that they never forgot. So women near his own age saw through him immediately and they refused him. They had no interest. Women a few years younger found him attractive, but they always thought he was a little off. Only the younger girls or truly naive women would fall for his lines. I have stories and stories, and I'm not going to go into them all because all these women, of course, came out once he was arrested and said, oh, I remember that guy. I went home with him. He was weird. Many women would turn him away because he was that guy that just came on a little too strong. You meet him and he's like, you're the love of my life. We're soulmates. We're going to be together forever. Okay, cool. We've known each other an hour.
Exactly.
He was having a hard time keeping and finding a job that would pay enough for his swinging lifestyle so he could impress women. So he found an old prison buddy and they talked about how to make money and they decided they would become robbers. And this was the guy who told him that the way to make sure you never get caught is to cover your hair, use some sort of disguise. And he also said, cover your nose because your nose is one of the areas that will get you caught if they're able to describe a distinguishing feature. And it's usually the nose.
I see that. Yep.
So his friend and him started committing robberies and they would use fake beards, so tape on beards, and they would put athletic tape across their noses to disguise, and then they would have a hood or a ski cap or something like that over their hair. So there would be very few features that someone could describe.
Yeah.
He was originally known as the I-5 Bandit because it started as robberies that he started doing with his friend just to make money, and then it escalated into murders. So December 9th, 1980 was the first robbery that was reported. This started in Vancouver, Washington. It was a convenience store. It was a single female clerk. She said the guy came in. He was tall. He had a fake beard. It was obvious it was a fake beard. He told the clerk to empty the cash register and to turn around and watch the TV and not look at him. The surveillance camera was pointing right at him, but unfortunately it was broken.
How many times have we heard that?
So many times.
Right. They're just there for looks. Most of them don't even work.
4 days later, he showed up at the Baskin Robbins right as they were closing. It was one young teenage girl working behind the counter, pulled out a small silver gun and told her to go into the back room. After emptying the cash register, she turned around and went and she thought she would be shot. He just left. 1 day later, December 14th, he showed up at the Arctic Circle convenience store and he robbed them for $300. So this is starting to get out there that there's robberies going on and they think they have what they are calling the I-5 Bandit. However, it's about to take a darker turn. On December 21st, 1980, at a Church's Chicken right off of I-5, a young girl, 18 years old, was getting off of her shift. She had called her dad to come pick her up, and she went into the bathroom. As she was in there, someone pushed open the door. A large man with bandages on his nose and wearing a ski cap came in, closed the door, and locked it behind him.
It's like one of the scarier things to think about.
It's a one-stall bathroom. Okay. And while she's in there, there are literally customers out eating and her coworkers are working. Ugh. He comes in, he locks the door behind him. He tells her to take her shirt and bra off. He assaulted her by taking off his pants and forcing her to masturbate him.
Okay.
He did ejaculate on her breasts.
Oh.
He told her to go and sit on the toilet and to wait 5 minutes before leaving the bathroom, and then he left.
Oh my gosh. This is a teenager?
She's an 18-year-old girl who's just waiting for her dad to come pick her up. I am not saying any of the names of the women who survive because they want to have normal lives.
Sure, absolutely.
So I'm going to honor them. They did help bring him down, a lot of these girls. Good. I'm so glad.
Can you imagine just getting off of work and you're going to use the bathroom real quick and then head outside to your dad? And that's what happens to you.
So right after he assaulted this young girl at Church's Chicken, 20 minutes later, he showed up in Bothell, Washington at a Baskin Robbins. Okay, let me go back. At Church's Chicken, he had stopped there to eat. She came out of the bathroom afterwards, obviously shaken up, and she told her coworker, and the coworker said he was just in here. He ordered a number 5 or whatever. They called the cops. And just, 20 minutes later, he's already up the freeway because it's I-5 and he can go 80 miles an hour or whatever. Wow. And cops have nothing, by the time they show up. So he's 20 minutes up and now he needs money. So he goes into the Baskin Robbins. Once again, it was 2 young girls. He had a proclivity for young girls, as we all know. And he also seemed to pick out those kind of places to rob.
Well, most fast food is going to be young.
It's going to be young high school students. But he was looking for girls specifically because every place that he goes is usually 1 to 2 girls working. So he's obviously looking. These 2 girls were spared of the sexual assault and they were just told to sit on the floor and count to 50. They described him as having tape on his nose, a fake beard, and a small silver revolver. So law enforcement up and down I-5 is getting all of these reports of robberies and now they have a sexual assault. So they're trying to figure out what is going on, but it goes quiet because it's now the Christmas holidays. And Randy actually went to Medford at this time to visit yet another friend from his prison days. So I bring this up because on December 30th, he met a girl named Shelly Jansen, a 22-year-old University of New Mexico student. She is home from Albuquerque visiting her dad. She was said to be absolutely gorgeous, like stunning beauty, but she was very naive and she had this dream of meeting her prince. Here comes Randy Woodfield to buy her a drink and fill her with all of these grand stories where he would come across to most women as coming on strong. She saw him as this romantic knight in shining armor, soulmate. They're going to be together forever. He convinces her that he's the one. Shelly's completely enamored with Randy. They don't have sex. He's like, we're going to wait because I love you. And she's just head over heels for this guy. They hang out for New Year's Eve and then she has to go back to school in New Mexico and he says, I'll write you, I'll call you. And he sends her flowers, love bombing, right? Because he's a narcissist. So she goes back to school. He moves into a new townhouse in Eugene, Oregon. He's not supposed to leave. He was supposed to stay with the parole officer. And he's like, I'm just going to move. And he doesn't tell her.
Well, she only checks in once a month, right?
Yeah, she's not real on top of it.
Okay. Maybe she liked him too.
I was going to say, I think a lot of women really liked him because he was good looking and he was charming. Randy was going to start a new life. He decided to move to Eugene and he found a room for rent in a townhouse of a single mother named Arden Bates, who had a 6-year-old son. He was described as being the perfect roommate.
A roommate?
Yeah, he lived in her house, like in a bedroom. She just needed a room. He told her that he was down on his luck right now. He was unemployed, but he was getting an unemployment check per month and he would be able to pay the bills. She said there was something about him. She knew he was probably doing something illegal, but he always paid his bills, so whatever. He was also described as being very sweet with her 6-year-old son. The neighborhood boys loved him. He even took all the neighborhood boys to see the Harlem Globetrotters. Like, he's just the perfect guy. Yeah. He told her he was going to be enrolling in college and he always seemed to have lots of money. She did notice that, like, for an unemployed guy, he partied a lot. He made a lot of long distance phone calls.
Right. And he's using her phone.
Yes. She said she didn't care because he always paid his share.
Interesting.
She also said he got a lot of mail. He told her that he's
a terrific pen pal at this point.
This guy, I don't know how he finds time. I guess he's not unemployed.
Maybe he doesn't sleep.
He told Arden that he had a serious girlfriend named Shelly. They were going to get married. She was the one. While he's saying that, he's bringing other girls home. She had a 16-year-old babysitter that came over to watch her 6-year-old son. When she came home, she found the 16-year-old in bed with Randy.
Oh my gosh.
Her 30-year-old roommate is in bed with a 16-year-old.
Okay. And she didn't kick him out?
No.
Or call the cops?
No. It's a different time, I guess. I don't know. He also brought home 2 young girls he found hitchhiking, and she said they stayed in his room for a few days and then he took them somewhere. She knew the stuff was going on, but she never said anything to the cops.
Yeah.
So he's moved in now. It's been a couple of weeks and he decides he needs money. January 8th, 1981, he shows up at the same convenience store he robbed on December 9th, the one that had the broken surveillance camera. This time there is a 30-year-old clerk working. He was wearing a fake beard and he had tape over his nose and a ski cap. He pulled out his revolver and said, empty the register. She did. And then he told her to take her shirt off and lift up her bra. He told her to sit down and then he laughed at her and then he left.
You laughed at her? What? She's so old?
I guess.
Oh
She's
my
not
gosh.
16.
She had a wrinkle somewhere.
Fortunately, the surveillance camera was working this time. 3 days later, he showed up at a Eugene, Oregon grocery store and robbed them, but there was a elderly man working, so he just took the money and ran. On January 12th, Susie Benet was working at the General Market in Sutherland, Oregon. He showed up and said, "Give me all your money out of the cash register." She thought he was joking. It was late at night and she just thought this guy was coming in. She says, "Oh yeah, sure." And then he pulled out a gun and she realized he wasn't, and she started going around the counter. He made her so nervous she could not remember how to open the register.
No.
So she's like fumbling and freaking out because this gun is pointed at her, and he gets really angry with her, and he went to grab her by the blouse and he was holding the gun at the same time, and the gun goes off and shoots her in the shoulder.
Okay.
After that, he tells her to sit down. He takes the money and he runs. She realizes she's shot in the shoulder and she's bleeding, and so she calls 911. When the officers show up, they actually have evidence this time because there is a bullet left behind.
Yeah.
They said she was very lucky because if it had been like 4 centimeters lower, it would have hit her in the lung.
Gunshots are actually really scary. So when you hear someone surviving from like multiple gunshot wounds, I don't understand, because some people can die from getting shot
With
in
one
your shoulder. Yeah.
Scary. But she fortunately lived and was able to give a description. They also found a fingerprint on the cash register, but it was not useful because it was a gloved print, so they could tell that the perpetrator was wearing a glove. The other thing that was reported for the first time is that someone outside noticed that there was a gold Volkswagen Bug parked nearby. Usually when he was committing these crimes, he was walking from wherever he parked his car. I guess I haven't said this in the other ones, but they said he would run off, and he would run off into the night. Like, he wasn't running and getting in a car ever. So this was the first time a vehicle had ever been mentioned. I think he would like park his car like 3 restaurants over or something. He just didn't want it to be near where someone could see it and track it. But for whatever reason, this night he parked nearby. Maybe there was nowhere else.
Yeah.
So on January 14th, 1981, so he's been at it since December 9th, committing robberies mostly. He changes it up. And this story, I'm just going to say trigger warning, like this is probably a really hard story for me to read. It involves sexual assault of children.
And this is in 1 month.
It's been 4 weeks since he started. So he's escalating. On January 14th, 1981, 2 little girls, they were 8 and 10 years old, sisters. Their mom routinely left them at home while she went to the gym right around the corner. They would only be at home for 30 minutes. They were left at home to just watch TV, and their mom said she would be home right at 6 p.m. 10 minutes after their mother left the house, someone knocked at their door. Mary Sue looked out and saw a very large man on the porch, and she did not want to answer the door. He said, "My car broke down and I just need to use your phone very quickly." The little girl let him in and said, "Our phone is right there. You can use it." And she left the front door open. She was trying to be as safe as I'm sure her mom had told her to be. He went in and pretended to dial on the phone. It didn't seem like he was having a real conversation, and he acted like he was talking to someone named Jim. They thought he was acting odd, and when he hung up the phone, they said, "Okay, you need to go." He said, "My friend's on his way. Can I just hang out here with you guys and watch TV?"
Yikes.
She said, "No, you need to go."
Yeah. This is the older sister at this point?
Yes, this is the 10-year-old. The 8-year-old got scared and ran into her mom's bathroom. The older sister once again told him he needed to leave. And at that point, he closed the front door and said, "I'm just going to stay and watch some TV." He then told the older 10-year-old girl that she should go join her sister in the bathroom. He followed them both in there and did some horrible things.
Freaking babies.
He left. Afterwards, their mom came home at 6 o'clock and found them, obviously shaken up. And they called the cops. There was semen left behind at the scene that they were able to use to connect him in the investigation.
Okay.
I'm just not going to say anything
It's just
more.
so scary hearing about anything like this, having young children.
I bring up this horrible situation because this is when the cops knew that there was really something bad going on, because you have a rapist that is now preying not just on women, but now children.
Teenagers, children, like he's
like
covering
8 and 10, like this.
Yeah.
To them, this meant that they were dealing with a very dangerous man who seemed to be in a manic state.
And he was just walking in wherever he wanted to go.
this is really scary for law enforcement because there's no pattern.
Right.
The victims are all over the place and he keeps showing up in random places. All they know is that he's along I-5. There's potentially a gold Volkswagen Bug.
Right.
And he could hit anywhere. So imagine, like, I put myself in that time, how fearful you would be.
Right.
If you lived anywhere near I-5. So far, he's only hit Washington and Oregon, but that will change.
Oh, that's right. He's going down into California.
So the next incident I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on because this is the incident that he will actually be convicted for and will put him behind bars.
Okay. Thank God.
The cops had never seen a series of assaults and robberies happen in this quick of time. Couldn't stop himself. It was just this manic need to just keep doing these things.
Yeah. And it was all different. It's not just one thing. It was just like, right now I'm going to do this. 20 minutes from now I'm going to go do this. And I'm going to go do this. And tonight I'm doing this and this.
Like whatever just pops in his mind, I'm going to do that. So mid-January, January 18th, there were two young women, Sherry Hull and Lisa Garcia. I will say right now, Lisa Garcia has also been called Beth Wilmot. I don't know which name is the actual name. I think one of them was made to protect her because she's still alive today and she was a survivor. I am going to call her Lisa Garcia, but if you listen to other podcasts or read other things, you will also see the name Beth Wilmot. These are both the same person.
Okay.
Sherry Hull's father owned a cleaning business. And these young girls, they were both 20 years old. They would clean office buildings. On January 18th, they were working at the Transamerica building. It was a title company and it was on the outskirts of Salem, Oregon, just off of Interstate 5. It was in a mall and they were the only ones there. It was around 9 p.m. They had gotten off to a bit of a late start. Usually they wanted to get done before it got dark, but this was a quick cleaning job. It wasn't very large and they thought it would only take them about 30 minutes to complete.
See, even you just talking about two women doing a cleaning thing, like it doesn't seem like it's the same even general area of where he's been doing other things. That just seems so random.
It was so random. And that makes it even more frightful if you live there because it's like it could be anyone at any time.
Anyone.
The office that they worked at had windows on every single wall. And when you had the bright fluorescent lights on, you could easily see. So he could have just driven by and he would see these two girls.
They just popped out to him.
They had the front door unlocked because they thought they would only be there like 30 minutes. Sherry Hull had moved from Texas recently and had just taken this job while she saved up money to go back to school. Everything was going well. It was a small office, like I said, so it didn't seem like it would take very long. They'd already cleaned the floors and dusted. Sherry said, I'm going to take the trash out. And then Lisa said, I'm just going to finish cleaning the door. And then we're done and we're out of here. But someone must have seen Sherry when she took the garbage out. That someone, unfortunately, was Randall Woodfield. He actually followed Sherry as she was walking back in from taking the trash can out. He ran up behind her. He had a silver revolver. His face was hidden by the hood of his jacket. He also had a fake beard.
I mean, does he just drive around with it?
He didn't even have a car, so he walked up. Like, this one's really strange to me.
Okay.
So I don't know if he was just out trolling the mall.
Just looking for his opportune time.
He took the women into the small lunchroom, which was the only part of the office that could not be seen from outside. He demanded that they strip naked and get down onto the floor. He then forced them to perform oral sex. He demanded that they swallow his ejaculate. When he was done with them, he told them to lie face down, and he asked them if they had any rope. And they said no. Sherry was hysterical. She was pleading for her life. She swore she would never tell anyone what he had done, just let them go. Lisa described that seemed to make him like more crazy almost in a way. Like he enjoyed hearing Sherry beg for her life.
Yeah. That's the hard thing with being in a similar situation, to know how to react, because they're not all going to be triggered by the same things or get off on the same things.
Yeah, you don't know.
You never know. And so you're always taking a bit of a gamble, I think.
And so Lisa tried to approach it from the more rational side.
Okay, so we're getting both.
Yeah, so he's getting both. But she said there was just this cold look in his eye, and she could just tell that he'd already decided what he wanted to do.
Ooh.
So he told them to turn around, lay down, and put their hands behind their backs. And then he shot, basically execution style, right next to Sherry's head. He put a bullet into her back of her head. And then he moved to Lisa and he fired a shot into her head. She felt it go in, and then she laid still and pretended to be dead. Her friend Sherry started moaning, so it was clear that she was not dead. And so he turned back to Sherry and shot her 3 more times.
Oh, no.
He then walked out into the night and left the 2 young women there to bleed out on the floor, thinking he had left no witnesses. But thank God.
Yeah, she just...
Lisa survived. This is an amazing story because she was shot in the head. It's even more amazing. So she's able to crawl into the office and she dialed 911. She was lucid. She was able to describe everything that happened. She even gave the description over the phone. She stayed on the 911 call until the cops got there.
While bleeding from the head.
Right. And the 911 operator said it was amazing when she heard what the actual injuries were, that this woman could even talk.
Right.
She didn't realize, I think, how bad it was. And after she hung up the phone, she saw a mirror and she realized the right side of her face was a bloody mess. And she could see her face swelling across her cheek and jaw, over her eye, and deep into her hairline. I guess this is just the survival instinct. She was able to stay awake until the ambulances got there. So this is when a very important person in the story comes into play. His name is Detective Dave Kamenik, and he was from the Marion County Sheriff's Office. He was the main detective, and he became kind of like just a father figure to Lisa. He was very sweet. He was very kind. Like,
you hear that often.
He just seems like, I want to give this guy a hug. Like, he did a lot for these victims.
Yeah.
So when they showed up, they found that the killer had been wearing gloves and he had not taken off a single item of clothing, and he had kept his hair covered up by the hood of his jacket. So they didn't really have any forensic evidence. What they did have was the .32 caliber bullets that were in the victim's head. And they did find a single curly black pubic hair. Sherry Hull was found barely breathing. She had 3 gunshot wounds to her head. She was rushed to the hospital, but she did not survive. Lisa was found fully conscious. She actually had 2 gunshot wounds. She only remembers being shot once, but she was actually shot twice. And they were fired execution style at point blank range to the back of her head, but she survived.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I was just talking to you about the shoulder one. You never know.
I know, when you said that, I was like, wait till you get to this story. When they took the x-rays, the emergency physicians were just absolutely shocked that she was able to survive it. The bullet had been fired into her head and had skirted right along her skull under her skin to rest a few inches in front of her right ear. The same bullets that had penetrated and killed Sherry had not even gone through Lisa's skull. So they were talking about how some of us have stronger skulls than others, and she must have just had that stronger skull.
That's
right up
crazy.
to her ear.
What does she have, titanium back there?
Right. Or she was just meant to live and put this asshole
Something intervened. And
that's
said,
what I believe.
Yeah.
Not only did she survive 2 bullets to the head, but she was able to testify against Sherry's killer. Dave Kamenik realized that this was probably connected to everything else going on the I-5, and he was the one that put out like a notice to all jurisdictions to be on the lookout for this guy. He said somebody was robbing, raping, and ruining lives and had been doing it undetected for a month and a half at this point.
Right.
And we got to put this guy down because he's not stopping. Just one day later, the Vancouver, Washington skating rink is robbed. It's a female cashier working. She's 17 years old, and she's there at the end of the day. And there are 3 boys, aged 10 and 11. They're celebrating their birthday. She's closing down, and a man walks in with a silver revolver, takes all of the money out of the cash register, and runs off. 7 days later, he shows up again in Eugene, Oregon, at a Dairy Mart with a 23-year-old female clerk. Once again, he just takes the money and runs. On January 29th, he showed up at the Winchell's donut shop, and there was a 20-year-old female clerk working and a young customer that happened to just be in there. He did sexually assault those girls. He showed up 1 hour later, 35 miles south in California. So now he's moving into California, and he held up a supermarket there for money. Well, the reason he needed all this money is because he was on his way to meet the love of his life, Shelly.
Oh, so this all has a purpose.
Yeah, he needs money because he's meeting her in San Francisco. I just feel so bad for this little girl because she's like in love with this guy. She's 22. She thinks she's met her knight in shining armor. And while she's at home dreaming about him, he's out literally raping and killing girls, women. It's just, Okay, so he meets up with Shelly in San Francisco on January 30th. So we have a few days of reprieve for all the workers along I-5.
Okay.
Shelly did say that he never had actual sex with her, and she thought that was odd, but he made it sound like they were just going to wait for marriage. But he always asked her to
go down on him.
Okay. Yeah, which seems to be his kink.
Yeah, it does.
He asked Shelly to marry him. So they got engaged in San Francisco. And he called his parents and he said, I met the love of my life. I'm getting married.
You keep forgetting, like, he has family.
Yeah, his parents have no idea this is going on. They think he's great. He has 2 sisters. He goes and visits his sisters quite often while he's doing all of this. Like, he's living a normal life. That's the thing. And he's the nice, soft-spoken guy. Everybody, I haven't gone into this much, but he has a very soft voice. So he sounds very, like, just caring and patient and the last guy you would ever think think would commit murder. So his parents are excited. They think he's finally getting his life together. He's found the love of his life. He's going to get married. They're going to have grandbabies, all of this. So they stay together until February 2nd in San Francisco. Shelly thinks, she's getting married. They've set a date. She's going to move to Eugene, Oregon with him. They're going to get a house, and all of this is going to happen in March. So she leaves on cloud 9.
Wait, did she meet him in December?
She met him on December 30th.
And it's January.
And it's now January 3rd. So a month later, they're engaged. It's young love,
I know.
He's blah,
and you
blah,
hear about that, and that's always the people who stay together until they die or something like that.
And she's a very naive girl that has romanticized this moment her whole life.
Right.
And so she's the perfect one to pull this over on. And maybe he thinks he is going to turn his life around.
Maybe he does love her.
He says many times that if he could just find a good woman that wouldn't cheat on him and would love him, that he would be able to stop. Mm-hmm. We know that's not true, but
yeah,
I think he truly believed that. But he's engaged to her now, and he's still doing this stuff because he's going to keep going for another month. She left on February 2nd. He said, I'll call you. She thought he was leaving from San Francisco to go visit his sister who lived in California, just a little bit south of San Francisco, called Shasta County. And she kept calling him, and he didn't answer.
Calling him where? At his sister's house?
So I'm not real sure how this works.
Because it's not cell phone days, right?
Yeah, he called from a payphone. It says on February 4th, that was the last time she heard from him. So I don't know exactly how he's calling her. I think he was calling her from along places. Maybe he was telling her what hotels he was going to stay at.
Well, maybe if he's traveling, then maybe he was meant to be at hotel.
Yeah, wherever he was supposed to be, he wasn't
right.
answering. And so she was concerned. She was like, I think, maybe he got in a car wreck. Maybe something happened, right? So she's freaking out. The other thing that he was doing when he was making these calls to Shelly or any of his other girls, because he was still calling other girls, not just Shelly, he was using the long distance number that would bill it back to Arden Bates. This is important.
This is the girl, right?
Yeah.
That he's living with.
Yeah, because that way he can pay his bill, and this will come into play in helping catch him. So he was driving down to Shasta County, and he actually did go visit his sister. But while he was there, he was up to other things.
Okay.
So on February 3rd, he showed up at the Burger Express, and there was an 18-year-old cashier and a 46-year-old woman, and she was actually the wife of the owner. So he asked them for the money out of the cash register, and then he told them to go into the bathroom. He taped the owner's hands and feet with an adhesive tape. It's like an athletic tape. So the same thing he was using on his nose, he now has decided he's going to tie his victims up. So he keeps changing.
Right.
He taped her feet together, and then he taped her hands behind her back together, and then he put a piece over her nose and mouth, which sounds dangerous. I don't know how she was breathing. And he basically pushed her into the stall, and then he focused on the 18-year-old because we know that's his type. So he sexually assaulted her in the same way he has the others, via oral sex. But then he...
Forcing the oral sex. For them on to him.
And right. He liked to force them to swallow it. He also has herpes, by the way.
Oh, that's true.
That makes him an even bigger piece of shit because many of these girls ended up with herpes.
No.
He also decided to commit sodomy or attempt to. Fortunately, as he was doing this, thank God for this poor girl, the owner's husband shows up. He comes in and he hears
crying,
the young girl. Yeah.
Moaning.
He's like, where's my wife? And he starts banging on the bathroom door. Randall opens the door and flees. And of course, the owner is more worried about his wife who's tied up and this 18-year-old girl. So he's not going to go after the guy.
Right. Exactly. Especially coming into a scene like that.
Right.
She was probably undressed in some ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
So sadly, just 2 hours after this event,
2 hours,
Randall Woodfield would show up and commit another murder. So let me talk about the victims before we go into what happened.
Okay.
The Eckerd family lived in Mountain Gate, California. They lived at the end of a road that was right off of I-5.
Okay.
The family was Steve and Donna Lee. Steve was a firefighter, and Donna Lee was a registered nurse who worked at the local hospital. Donna Lee had 2 daughters, Janelle and Kristen. So Janelle was 14, Kristen was 12, and their stepfather was Steven. They were a great family. They loved him. The sad part is when you are a first responder, often you have to leave your family at home alone at night while you go off. So this is a really tragic story because he's going to be one that gets called
back
to his own house.
Oh my
can you
gosh.
imagine the horror?
Yeah.
That's your worst nightmare. So that day on February 3rd, Donna Lee had a outpatient like surgical procedure done. Steve left for work and he calls and talks to his wife at 3:30 p.m. She said, I'm not feeling great. I'm just going to go lay down. So it was just her and Janelle at home. Kristen, the 12-year-old, had gone to a basketball game and she calls her mom at 6 p.m. to ask if she could go over to a friend's house after the basketball game. And her mom said, sure, you can go hang out with your friends. Just be home by 9 p.m. When Kristen would arrive home at 8:52 p.m. and call out for her sister and mom, they would not respond. This poor 12-year-old saw something that no person, especially not this young, should ever have to see. She found her mom and sister in her parents' bedroom. They were side by side on the bed. Donna Lee was in a nightgown that had been pulled down, exposing her breasts. Her ankles were bound with white tape, and her arms were also bound behind her with tape. Her mouth and nose were covered with the same tape. Her 14-year-old sister, Janelle, was completely naked, and her face was covered with blood. Being a firefighter's daughter, she immediately
Called 911,
but she also tried to make
resuscitate.
Yeah, she said she knew that her sister was dead because she could just tell, but she thought her mom might still be alive.
Right.
Steve Eckerd had to respond to his own house, and he had to see this scene too. He came into the house and he was able to confirm it was his wife and stepdaughter. There was a bullet in Janelle's neck, and then they also found multiple wounds to the back of her head, execution style. She was shot 7 times.
The little girl was shot 7 times?
Yeah. Donna had been shot twice. Detectives responding to the scene noted the similarity in the execution style of killing to those of the 2 girls in Oregon. So the detectives are like, why this house?
Right.
It's at the end of the street. It's not really like right off of I-5. You have to go into the neighborhood to get to it. It's like a neighborhood right off of I-5. There's many other houses. Why would this person choose this house? They're questioning Kristen, and she remembers while talking that her mom and Janelle were going to run up to the store to pick up a few things for breakfast the next morning.
He saw them.
So there was a convenience store at the end of their street that was right off of I-5 called Jake's. There was a resort town nearby, so a lot of people would go in there to get supplies before they went camping. After she says this, they look in the back of Janelle's jeans pocket and they find a check that had been made out to Jake's convenience store. But for some reason, she never actually made it to the store to cash it. So back in the days, your mom would write you a check and it was for like, I think it was for $10 or $15. So just enough to buy the supplies. So she'd go in, get the cash, and then buy the supplies. Her mom had just had an operation, so her mom was obviously not going to go in. So what they think happened is that Donna put a coat over her nightgown and drove Janelle down to the store, and then Janelle was going to go in and get the stuff while her mom waited out in the car. When they went and interviewed the cashier at Jake's, they said they had never come inside. So they were obviously intercepted when they pulled into the parking lot. Perhaps he jumped in the car with them, put the gun up to them. That's what I think probably happened. And then he made them take him back to their house.
Because his car is not with him. It's somewhere else far away. He's trying not to be connected to his car.
Right.
Because I just picture he starts to follow them or whatever.
Yeah, he didn't follow them.
His other way is just so much crazier. Already jumping in the car with them.
While I'm talking about this, I need to go back because there was one detail I left out on the Sherry Hull and Lisa Garcia.
Yeah.
As the cops were responding, not Kamenick, but another cop that was responding, they had put out, because of the 911 call, Lisa had described what the man looked like. She said he was tall, good looking, athletic, blah, blah, blah. As one of the cops was driving, he was about 1.5 miles away from the Transatlantic building, and he saw a guy on the side of the road, which would end up being Randall Woodfield. Mm-hmm. But he dismissed it because he's like, this guy's 1.5 miles away. Can't be the guy, but it fit the description. And this will come up in the trial. They talk about for him to have gotten there, he had to be a really good athlete. Well, Randall was a good athlete. Right. He was a great runner.
Completely ran away.
That is why they theorize that he never parked anywhere, because he was able to run so quickly back to wherever he hit his car.
Okay.
In this one, who knows where his car was, but somehow he intercepted them and ended up back at their house.
Okay.
They did retrieve the bullets from the bodies, and they found them to come from the .32 caliber gun, just like the ones we saw in the Sherry Hull and Lisa Garcia case, and also the one girl who had been shot in the shoulder. They were able to determine that not only did it come from the same caliber, .32, but it had to have come from the same gun, because they can look at how the markings are on the bullets. Yep. There were no signs of sexual assault on Donna Lee. They believe Janelle had been sodomized, and they believe it happened after death.
After death?
So this is really odd.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So he's changing his behavior again.
Right.
The guy is just a wild animal that needs to be put down right now.
Yes.
Nothing was stolen from the house except for a .38 special handgun Smith & Wesson. So this was a unique gun, and this is something that Steve Eckerd noticed was missing, and he was able to provide the serial number to the detectives. So now they know that he's out there with another gun.
That's good. They know exactly what's missing.
They determined that the bodies, based on rigor mortis, they had only died 1 hour before they were found by Kristen. She returned home at 8:52, so they were murdered around 7:42. Kristen's very fortunate that she came home as late as she did, because if she had come home any earlier, she may have been succumbed to the same.
He obviously didn't know either that her husband was who he was.
He probably saw Janelle get out of the car and she was his type.
Right.
That's what I think. And then he grabbed her and said, get back in the car. And
don't be anybody's type.
We are all someone's type. That's the scary part.
That is the scary part. We are all someone's type.
And there's too many scary men out there. So just one day after the double homicide, he was back at it. So February 4th, there was an unnamed victim in Wairika, California. She was 21 years old, and she had just stopped at a convenience store to buy some cigarettes. She got back into her car, and a man forced his way in with a gun and told her, "Don't look at my face," and pushed her into the passenger seat. He started driving off with her. He forced her to give him oral sex while he was driving. When she started crying, it made him angry. He kept asking her if he was as big as her boyfriend.
Like
and
his member?
His
so she survived.
Penis.
Yeah. Okay.
He basically wanted her to act like she enjoyed it. She said she just felt like he needed some kind of validation from her. He obviously hadn't had
a genuine
connection, but he has Shelly. That
happen.
it just doesn't make sense to me. So he has just been with this girl he got engaged to 2 days ago, and now he's killed 2 more people. He's raped the girl at the Burger Express, and now he's picked up another girl to rape. He's just out of his mind.
It must be too. Part of him wants to be this Christian person who has a wife and they're going to live happily ever after. And he knows that part of that is not fornicating with her until they're married.
Right. So he's like this,
but so it's all
old-fashioned guy with her.
He's like literally 2 different people.
He's Jekyll and Hyde.
Yes.
I wonder, I know they never said he came out as schizophrenic, but it just seems like 2 different people for sure. And this other person has compulsions that he can't control.
These are intense. 2 hours later.
Right. So he has her in the car. He keeps telling her not to look at him, but she is, side-eyeing and looking at him because she thinks if I don't die, if I get away, I want to know who this person is and put his ass in jail. He took her into the middle of nowhere. So he drove her into the woods outside of Wairika. And this is up in Northern California, so it's very the redwood trees, big.
Yeah.
Plenty of middle of nowhere type places.
Right.
He pulled over and told her to take all of her clothes off, and then he raped her. So once again, he's changing up his style.
It's just whatever he feels like in the moment with that person.
While he was raping her, he kept telling her how much she liked it, and she felt like she needed to respond. And he kept again asking, he was like, "I bet you've never seen a penis like this before," just needing full ego boost. So she did that because she wanted to live. And then he taped her wrists together with surgical tape again. And he left her in the rear seat, naked, tied together. And then he started driving back towards Wairika. At this time, she started just trying to talk to him normally and ask him questions. She told him about her boyfriend. She said they just had these normal conversations. She just wanted to keep him talking so he would see her as a human being.
Right.
And not kill her, which worked out for her. He pulled into a parking lot of a restaurant right off of I-5 in Wairika. And then he became Mr. Normal Guy. And he was like, "I will drop you off where, no one can see you since you don't have clothing on." He pulled in between, he's acting like this great guy. He made a comment to her that the reason that he raped women is because women had all the control when it came to sex, and that they got to have sex whenever they wanted to. And they basically withheld from men. And he gave her this lecture about she should put out more for her boyfriend. So he felt like he could only get sex from women when they wanted to, which is how it should be. It's called fucking consent, dude. And so I think his raping was just about bringing it back.
I mean, but it's so confusing. He has a woman who would probably do that with him.
She wants to have sex with him, and he's telling her no.
But he's not.
Real fucked up.
Sorry, no.
Brain.
He's just all kinds of messed up.
He told her not to call the police, and then he ran off into the night. Of course, she got out of the car, got her clothes on, and drove to the nearest police station. So let's go back to Detective Komenik, who I mentioned. He's up in Oregon, and he's realized it's been really quiet in Oregon for the last few days. Okay. But then he gets notice from California where the double murder happened. And he realizes it's 32 caliber. They start talking, and they realize now, once again, that they have a killer going up and down I-5, and it's now stretched into California. So they have put together a task force. They're all going to meet in Oregon and start trying to find this asshole that's doing all of this.
So they're kind of working together? You don't really hear that all the time, though.
But they had to, because he kept going all over the place.
Right.
And they started realizing all the composite drawings and all of the descriptions are all the same person.
Yeah.
The 32 caliber gun. And then they have the Volkswagen Bug. So those are the things that they know. So he shows back up in Oregon on February 9th at a fabric store in Corvallis. He robs the clerk and another customer, forces them into the back room, tapes them with the surgical tape to their wrists and their ankles, and then he sexually assaulted both of them. That same night, he shows up at a laundromat where two girls are working, and he does the same thing to them. So he's just out of control.
That's out of control.
He shows up 3 days later in Vancouver, Washington again at 6 p.m. He shows up at the Sassy Dress Shop. It is an elderly clerk working. He binds her with the tape, and then he leaves with the money. 1 hour later, he shows up in Olympia, Washington, which is 100 miles north. Like, this is...
Jeez.
He's flying.
He didn't get caught going 100 miles an hour?
Yeah. So he shows up at a drive-in restaurant, and there's two teenage girls working there, and he ties them up. He takes them into the freezer. What an asshole here. He sexually assaults them, and then he leaves them locked in the freezer.
Oh, no.
And then he shows up at 10 p.m. at the Dairy Queen in Bellevue. There's a male teenager and a female teenager working. He locks the male employee in the freezer and then sexually assaults the female and also robs them. Once again, it's going out that these are happening. You know, all of the departments are hearing that it's the same description. It's a tall, good-looking man with fake beard and athletic tape. He's still using the same MO.
What is he doing with all this money?
He's sending gifts to his girlfriend and all of his admirers. And he's paying to stay
because he doesn't have a job.
He has no job.
Oh my gosh.
This is his job. So we're getting to Valentine's Day now. He has decided he's going to go to Beaverton, Oregon. I won't go into all of this, but he had met a girl because during all this, he's still like out meeting girls and living a normal like bachelor life. So there's a story about this girl was driving on I-5. This guy came up next to her. She noticed him like trying to get her attention. She kind of blew him off. She kept looking over. He kept following her. And then she noticed he was kind of cute. He seemed flirtatious or whatever. So she pulls over. Mm-hmm. I'm sure this scares her to death now, but she pulls over. He gets out. He says, "I think you're cute. Can I have your number?" She gives him her number, and she lives in Beaverton, Oregon. So he becomes obsessed with this girl and decides he's going to go to Beaverton for Valentine's Day and
because
go out with her.
She was the one that seemed to have like started the interaction in a way with like cutesy flirting looks.
I don't know. But he gets her number and he starts calling her. He calls her at like 2:30 in the morning, and she lives with her parents, and her dad's like, "Oh, you don't want anything to do with this guy if he's calling you at 2:30 in the morning." So she never actually met up with him again, but that's the whole thing that took him to Beaverton. And he decided to rent a room at the Marriott, and he was going to have a Valentine's Day party. He called all the girls he knew in the area out of his black book. He sent Valentine's Day cards. He sent flowers. He, of course, also sent to his fiance, who still thinks, you know, they're in love. He plans to have a party at the Marriott, and no one shows up. So he's in Beaverton, Oregon. And I want to take you back to a girl I mentioned quite a while ago. Her name was Julie Wrights, and she was his 17-year-old girlfriend that he had the fight with in front of everyone. So he was living with the 17-year-old girl named Lucy, and then he met Julie because she came into the bar and he gave her drinks. She was the one that he went to her townhouse and woke up with her and her friend in a bed. That girl.
Okay.
So she lives in Beaverton. She has just celebrated her 18th birthday on February 12th. So just 2 days after her 18th birthday, she's getting close to graduating from high school. She's living at her mother's townhouse. And then she had another roommate that also lived there. They happened to be gone for the weekend. So she was home alone. Her mom returned from the weekend, opened the door, and she found her daughter, Julie Wrights, naked and laying on the stairs. She first thought her daughter had passed out drunk from one of the parties. She knew her daughter was going to Valentine's Day parties that weekend. She called out to her, and then upon closer examination, she realized her daughter's long brown hair was stained with blood. She had been shot execution style near contact with a gun to the head. Detective Detective Dave Bishop and Neil Loper were the ones that were called to take charge of the case. They came in and they saw that there were no signs of struggle. They theorized that it looked like she had been running down the stairs to get to the front door and get out of the townhouse and was shot from above by the attacker.
Okay, that's different.
Right. Her mom and roommate said the door was always locked and they did not believe Julie would ever let someone in that she did not know and trust. Julie had just finished from high school and was getting prepared for her graduation, and she'd been working as a clerk at a local children's clothing store. Once again, she was beautiful, long dark brown hair. She was dating many men around her own age at that time. She had been seen at several parties that night, and the last time anyone remembered seeing her was around 2 a.m. that morning. No one recalled any arguments or incidents at a party that would have led to her ending up murdered. So the autopsy revealed that there was a bullet deep in Julie's brain. It was a 38, the kind used in a 38 Special Smith & Wesson gun.
Ooh,
so that was the one that went.
The new one he picked up.
Time of death was estimated to be between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. Her body tested positive for male ejaculate, and they were able to determine that whoever semen it was a type B blood. Her sheets on her bed were also stained with the same type of semen. So they have good evidence at this one. Here's the difference. Beaverton's not right off of I-5. So they're not thinking at this time that it's connected. They're thinking this was a personal murder.
Right. Which it happened, kind of is.
Which it's not the same thing that an I-5 killer would do.
Right.
There's no even thought of that right now. So they start questioning people that she knows. They question over 100 people. They take 36 polygraphs and they have no leads. They have no idea who did this. A tip comes in from a cafeteria worker who overheard a high school student at lunch or whatever talking about a gold VW bug that was seen driving up and down Julie Wright's street very late on Valentine's Day night. They have gone through all of the interviews with no leads. So they decide to start looking because they look for who's close to her friend wise. And now they start taking her friends and they ask questions about what other acquaintances does she know? You know, tell me about anyone who might have been of interest, because they're really trying to figure out whoever did this to her had to have known her. It might be someone that's farther out of her close circle. So they started questioning the same people again. And one of Julie's close friends remembers a guy that used to work with Julie at the Fawcett Tavern years ago. She said he was much older than her, and she remembers they went out a few times, but he came on way too strong, according to Julie. She found out, you know, he had another girlfriend, and she decided she didn't want to date him, but they decided to be friends. This friend said that he drove a gold VW bug. She gave the name Randy Woodfield, and she said that Randy definitely knew Julie's number and where she lived and had probably been to her house a few times. A second person that they're interviewing brings up Randy, and she said he had asked to sleep in Julie's townhouse after taking them out drinking. So this is actually the friend that he crawled into bed. Yeah. So they ended up talking to her, and she's like, oh, I remember this one guy. He was kind of weird. Then there was a third person interviewed that mentioned Randy's name and said they had heard he was going to be in Beaverton around Valentine's Day. They then asked Julie's roommate specifically about Randy Woodfield, and she said yes, she knew him and he had visited their place before. She said Julie did not like him, and then they said would she have let him in if he showed up at the house, and her roommate said yeah, she probably would. She didn't like him, but she didn't hate him. She didn't have any reason to be afraid of him. Like if he showed up,
he listened when she said, hey, I don't like this,
she
go
wasn't
away.
So while this investigation is going on, they're hearing this guy named Randy Woodfield. Let's go back to the I-5 killer investigation. They still have no leads. They just know 32 caliber. 4 days later in Eugene, Oregon, at a 7-Eleven store at 3:25 in the morning, a customer shows up and there's no clerk in the store. He hears a muffled thumping sound and he goes into the back room and he finds a female clerk laying on her stomach, naked. Her hands and feet had been tied with tape and a piece was over her mouth. The cops showed up. They determined she had been sexually assaulted, but they found the adhesive tape. He had left the roll in the room. Ooh, so there's another
fingerprints.
Yep.
Right.
Well, he's been wearing gloves, but adhesive tape, they can look at how the adhesive tape is torn. And they can look at what it's made of, and they can narrow it down to where it was made, where it was bought.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's a good piece of evidence.
I'm coming up with new things and what impression?
Because we know that they've all been tied up, so now they have an actual piece of evidence. They also found some more left out in the street outside the store, so it's like some fell out of his pocket or something. 3 days later, on February 21st at 9 p.m. at a Taco Time restaurant in Eugene, Oregon, 2 girls on duty were back in the kitchen area. They were actually back there talking about the I-5 killer, and they were getting nervous because they know that he comes in when there's no customers, and they had no customers. And then they said while they're talking about it, the door opens and a man walks in and directly directly comes to the back. And the one 17-year-old girl's like, fuck this, I'm out of here. She bolts. She ran to the nearby Dairy Queen to call the cops. She left the other girl there by herself, but by the time they got back and the cops showed up, the man had already left. He went in, he saw her get out, and he just fled the scene.
So he didn't do anything to either one of them.
No.
That's good.
February 25th, 4 days later, at 6 p.m., a small restaurant in Corvallis, there's two girls working, 18 years old. One of them walked outside to use the restroom because the restroom was outside, and he was watching.
That's just mean.
I know.
Especially in those states.
In the cold states.
Yeah.
He followed her into the bathroom, and he used a gun, did the same thing he does to everyone, and then he bound her feet and hands with tape, and he left her alone in the dark bathroom. She said it took her over 15 minutes to get her feet free, and then she was able to get out. He did leave semen behind at the scene, and they were able to test it, and it showed B negative blood. So they're getting more and more evidence here. Mm-hmm. This would be the last known case.
Okay.
He's finally done.
What creeps me out is what you said at the beginning, how he may be linked to so
These are just the ones that we
many
know of.
more.
Right? They think he was linked to some crimes in Wisconsin too when he was there.
Right, that's
and
right.
he could have been doing this for years.
Yeah.
And they just hadn't linked it together until he went through this like complete craze.
Well, and most of it's connected to DNA, you said.
Yes. What I read was that they have linked 18 murders for sure to him through DNA.
Wow.
I could only find really good details on these 6.
For one.
Yeah, and we'll go into why, but over 60 sexual assaults too. So now let's get into how he was caught. On February 28th, because of the investigation into the Julie Wright's murder in Beaverton, they started looking into Randy Woodfield. That Officer Bishop was looking into this. So he contacted the parole officer of Randy Woodfield, who wasn't doing a very good job of keeping track of her parolee.
Right.
And she's like, oh, I realized he moved to Eugene and I was going to transfer his files eventually. Like she wasn't concerned. However, in talking to the parole officer, they said, well, we see that he was only arrested and convicted for robbery. And then the parole officers, oh, well, that's not the whole story. Let me tell you about the sexual convictions. So then they realized when they heard that,
it all matches up then.
Yeah.
All the different things that they've been experiencing.
They knew there was a task force going on in Salem, Oregon for the I-5 killer, and they felt like this was information that they should share. And Dave Kominick, the main detective out of Oregon that had been working on the Sherry Hull and Lisa Garcia case, realized when he heard this information, because they had been doing searches of all the sex offenders and, you know, parolees and everything, Randy Woodfield never came up because he wasn't listed as a sex offender.
Right. Idiots.
And so as soon as he heard this, he was like, okay,
this is our guy.
This parole officer let them know that he was a suspect in 3 other homicides. And that was in Sherry Ayers, because he had been questioned for that, but let go because his blood type didn't match.
Right.
And then Darcy and her boyfriend, Doug. They saw a mugshot, and that's when they knew
that it's him.
They saw a picture of him, and then they found out that his blood type was B negative. That cleared him in the Sherry Ayers murder, but it actually proved otherwise for the Julie Wright's murder and for the I-5 killer. The task force met together, went through all of this information. So they set up a parole officer meeting. So they made it seem very benign, just a typical parole officer meeting. And Dave Bishop was going to go along. So Dave Bishop was the lead on the Julie Wright's murder case right now. And Woodfield did not show up.
That's surprising because up until whatever point, he'd actually been doing good, right? And he'd been meeting with
until
her.
He went crazy. Like she hadn't heard from him in a couple months.
Oh,
and this is when he's committing all these murders. They drove over to his house. He was still living with Arden Bates, and they knocked on the door. Nobody answered, but they saw a gold VW Bug parked outside. He kept knocking, and then a sleepy Randy Woodfield finally answered the door, and he invited them in. He's like, yeah, come on in. They questioned him, and they said, do you know Julie Wright? They showed him a picture, and he said, no, I don't know her. They said, in order for us to take you completely out of the pool or whatever, can you take a polygraph test, and would you be able to submit DNA samples of your hair and blood? He started getting nervous, and then he kind of blurts out, he was like, just because I had sex with her doesn't mean that I would have killed her. He said he didn't know her just 10 minutes earlier. They said, can we search your house? And he gave them permission to search his house. Now, something that goes with due process, usually if you get a warrant to search a house, you're looking for specific items. But when you just ask someone if you can search their house,
you can
take whatever you want.
Right.
So this gave them free reign to just pick up whatever they found. So they did find, or they took into custody the following. They took a set of bedsheet and a mattress pad, probably to get DNA from from, they found a wallet with a receipt for a purchase of a .22 caliber gun. They found a whole box of athletic adhesive tape that had 6 rolls, one that was partially used. They found a gun cleaning kit for a .28 caliber gun. He got very nervous and was very concerned with why they were taking the adhesive tape. He was like, why would you want the adhesive tape? It's just my sport. Like, he started acting really weird.
Yeah.
They were only looking for evidence in the Wrights case, but when Detective Bishop saw the adhesive tape, it triggered something in his brain because he knew what was going on with the I-5 killer, and he was like, this is interesting. I'm going to take it.
Yeah.
They then interviewed Arden Bates, which is the woman who owned the house, and she mentions how often he calls long distance. Detective Bishop is like, do you mind if I see your latest phone bill? And so he starts looking through the calls that have been made, and he notices a charge from Mount Shasta, California on February 3rd. So at that time, they advised Miss Bates to take her son and get the hell out, basically. Go stay at a hotel. He's like, I knew it. I just had a feeling he was the I-5 killer. And they set up constant surveillance of the house. They couldn't arrest him yet, but they wanted to keep tabs and make sure he wasn't going anywhere. So Dave Kamenik decided he was a damn near perfect match. It had to be him. He knew that he had B negative blood, the Volkswagen Bug, the long phone bill that showed his movements all across the Pacific Northwest, and they all matched up to him being in the locations where all of the sexual assaults and the murders had happened. Now, this is where I get upset again. There was a dispute for days. They knew that they probably had the I-5 killer. Now you get the ego wars. Like, who gets to say they captured the I-5 killer?
Because we have 3 states, right?
Yep. And we have Detective Bishop that is on the Julie Wrights murder, and then you have Kamenik who is on the Sherry Hole fighting over this, and they're like, we can't arrest him yet. And he's just sitting there. He knows the cops are watching him.
Yeah.
And then finally Dave Kamenik's like, enough of this bullshit. I'm going in. He's probably in there destroying evidence, which he was. The other thing that they did is they took a picture of Randall Woodfield and they showed it to Lisa Garcia, and she looked at the picture and said, it's quite possibly him, but she didn't know for sure. And they said, fine, we're going to do a lineup in a few weeks and we'll fly you down. The other thing that was happening is the media got wind that the I-5 killer had been found. So now we have media trucks showing up outside of Randy's house, and it was getting out of hand. So Kamenik said, enough is enough. So on March 5th, there was a DA. I won't get into all the politics, but there was one DA that was holding it up. And finally, Kamenik was like, fuck the process. We're going to get this guy.
Fuck the process.
He rang the doorbell and he met Randall Woodfield face to face. Randy let them in. They said he was weirdly casual, just like a guy having friends over. He gave them a tour of the house. He answered their questions. But anytime they would bring up the I-5 incidents, he could tell that Randy was tensing up. So at this moment, the only thing that they could arrest Randy for was violation of parole. So they took him into custody. It's a pretty weak thing to hold somebody, but they were hoping if they could get him into custody, they could find other things by searching his house. They also got him into a lineup, and they called in all of the witnesses that they could from up and down the I-5 killer's crime spree. Randall Woodfield was labeled number 5 over and over again. As the 6 men stepped into the viewing room, the victims chose number 5, mostly not because of his look. It was his voice. The women who were not convinced looks wise, as soon as he talked, they knew it was him.
Yeah.
On March 16, 1981, there was multiple indictments from Oregon and Washington jurisdictions for murder, rape, armed robbery, attempted kidnapping, illegal possession of a firearm, and sodomy. The only thing that he ever stood trial for was the one case of Sherry Hole murder and the attempted murder and rape of Lisa Garcia. Lisa was able to testify against Randy in court. He was sentenced in fall of 1981 to life in prison because there was no death penalty in Oregon. The judge actually said when sentencing him that if there was death penalty in Oregon, Randy would have gotten it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. There was a long line of other jurisdictions with cases they wanted to try Randy for, like especially the Eckerd murders. You know, Julie Wright's mom wanted him to go, but they realized at this point it would be overkill and it was going to cost millions of dollars to try him for all of the things because he had done so fucking much.
As long as he's in jail forever, everybody kind of called a truce on it.
Right. Okay. And the California Shasta County legal system said if he ever came up for parole, they would convict him and make sure he got the death penalty. But because in California, he could get the death penalty. Any chance this guy's going to get out, we will make sure he is taken to California and given the death penalty. So there's no chance this guy's ever getting out.
Right.
He's got too many people waiting, which is good for all of us.
Wow.
So as of today, Randy Woodfield is 72 years old and he remains in the Oregon State Penitentiary, but that hasn't stopped him from terrorizing women. Over the last 42 years, he continues to write letters to women, seducing them and trying to use them and plead to to them that he's innocent and get them to send him money. And he's getting this. His parents no longer talk to him. His dad said, "This is not the son I know," and his family has not spoken to him since he was put into prison.
He's 72 now. His parents should be
I'm
dead.
saying, yeah, when he was put into jail in 1981, his parents never talked to him again. His sister didn't visit him. He was completely cut off. So Randy has been married 3 times while in jail. I never understand this.
It happens a lot. Sometimes gives them in different jails
conjugal
more
rights.
Privileges.
Yeah.
Sometimes not even conjugal, but just some kind of different privilege.
Like I said, he's still preying on women, and women are still falling for his, I guess, charming ways that he has. Randy has never admitted guilt and claims that he is innocent of all the charges against him. Criminal psychologists and detectives that have interviewed him over the years says he seems cold, distant, and completely unremorseful. To this day, even at 72 years old, they say Randy considers himself a step above other inmates. He's a typical narcissist. He spends so much time on his appearance while in jail. He tries to impress the female guards. He's just in there preening and acting like he's still the ladies' man. And he still does the exposure, like I mentioned before.
He still does that?
Yeah. I don't know if he still does that at 72. Last I saw, like, he hasn't done a lot of interviews over the years, and I think a lot of people have forgotten about him, which he should be forgotten about because he's a piece of shit. But he is now, from what I understand, in the last decade or so, he's just very reserved and just sits in his cell and doesn't have a lot of friends. He's well known as a sexual pervert now, so I can't imagine that inmates want to hang out with him. That is the story of the I-5 killer. May he continue to rot in jail.
Wow. The crazy part about that is that it was over a couple of months that we know of what he did. But I'd like to know when the earliest crime that he committed that ties back to his DNA was found.
1974. So this was in Wisconsin. There was a girl, and I cannot remember her name. I did not write this down, but they have connected him to a college student in Wisconsin that went missing. Like, it looked like she was like walking home at night or something. She believes she got picked up by Randall.
So that's the earliest one.
So that's when he was there playing for the Packers. 7 years.
Yeah.
He could have been stopped.
7 years of stuff.
The other thing, there was another serial killer active on the I-5 freeway that was a strangler. And so some of the victims they find, they don't know if it was Randall Woodfield or if it was this guy. And then also Ted Bundy. There was a hitchhiker that came up that they don't know which one.
They're active the same time. They're both good looking. They were both able to get women.
The 70s was just a scary time.
It was.
Especially on the West Coast for whatever reason. I don't know what was going on there, but there was a lot of serial killers. I found this one because I was looking for, when we were talking about doing dreams, I was looking for serial killers that, or any killer that acted in a dream. And he came up because of his quote saying that he thought he did it in a dream.
Because he's still not taking
responsibility. He can't, admit it. So that's why he came up. And I didn't realize how fucked up he was until I started researching. And then I was like, I'm glad to be done with him so I can move on to something that's not as dark and depressing.
Yeah, I was watching you talk about some of these things and you were physically bothered.
I really can't handle young girls being exposed to horrible things.
On that note,
thank you for listening.
Yeah,
even to the dark stuff, we will bring, light and love like we have before. And we'll continue to bring some of the dark stuff too. Please send us in any stories or topics that you would like us to talk about. Please email us at lucidlabpodcast@gmail.com, or you can mail us
at P.O. Box 251 East Lake, Colorado 80614. And please follow us everywhere we are.
Please.
And everywhere we are is just Lucid Lab Podcast.
And that's on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook.
Yes.
Please stick with us. Please like us on wherever you listen to your podcasts. Please rate us 5 stars.
Kindly and share. Anyway, we got to go now because we
got things to do tonight.
I have to go do some stuff.
Well, we're thinking about you guys. We can't wait to hear from you. And in the meantime,
stay so very lucid.
Stay lucid, guys.
Take care.
Bye.